This right here is a pan, which can be picked up at your local poundland or dollar store, whatever cheap equivalent you have in your country. Either way, it'll set you back about £1 or $1 in each respective region, and do keep in mind that the quality will vary depending on how much you actually spend on your pans. Now, don't anyone panic, as we have a special kind of benchmark for this pan. Firstly, leaving outside in the lovely British rain, as we can see, it's moderately collecting rainwater pretty well, with around 3 drops per second on average, occasionally dropping below this slightly when the rain was letting up. So, taking this inside, we can see that our pan will actually need some modifications for this video, and if we're going to be doing some extensive gaming on it, we need to grab our closest located Raspberry Pi, along with some black electrical tape, just to make sure that we can actually do these modifications. Using Poundland electrical tape isn't exactly recommended for this kind of stuff, as it doesn't appear to actually act as tape. In fact, it's the worst excuse for tape I've ever seen. It's got less stick than a destroyed forest. Anyway, this all in one place, we can now see that the pan is a computer, with specifications including a Raspberry Pi Model 1B, which is pretty decent, and you can grab those cheaply too if you too want to modify your pan. Now, for our setup, we're going to be using some pretty heavy equipment, with my Trinitron TV as a monitor for a crisp 240p or 4i output for most for our games, and general desktop usage, as really this thing isn't all too powerful, so it sort of helps out that our Pan Pi hybrid won't have to use all its power just trying to get a display out of it. And in general, we had to find out why the Pan Pi hybrid thing wasn't actually working, and the reason for this was that it turned out that some dodgy ass cable just wouldn't provide it with enough power. So it turns out using a micro USB cable you found on the floor a few years ago to power a PC type thing just doesn't work well. So ultimately we need a fresh OS install, and I had to download the old version of Raspbian, which worked okay on a 4GB SD card, as unfortunately I don't own anything other than a few 4GB ones, so I can't install the latest version, but I can still install an old version and then update to the newest. It makes sense in the end, and you'll see exactly what I mean, while adding the custom command so we could get 240p progressive scan for our PAL TV, as trust me, 576i on an NTSC mode does not look nice on this old Trinitron, and I really don't want to give any of our viewers a seizure today. So what are we actually going to need to do once we've actually got this thing turned on and booted? Well, first of all, for our web browsing needs, I thought I'd try and install Chromium, as I remember that being the best way to browse the internet on the Raspberry Pi Pan, whatever we're gonna call it, I don't even know at this point. As the install has been changed to Chromium browser though, it did throw me off for a while, as I kept typing in sudo apt-get install Chromium instead of sudo apt-get install Chromium browser. This is of course after I downloaded all the latest Raspberry Pi updates from the website, which gives us access to a whole load more software on the Pi Store, which doesn't actually exist. That's been shut down, so there's no point in me saying that anymore. But of course we can browse on the internet and find out exactly what we can get, and browsing is slow, but it's very much usable with Chrome. You can actually browse the internet, so I'm not going to say it can't. But the issue is, why would you want to browse the internet? Surely you want to be able to game on your pan. First up, we have Minecraft Pi Edition, which ran perfectly fine. It felt like a perfectly smooth 60 FPS most of the time, but given this was based on an older version of Minecraft Pocket Edition, which in turn was based on an older version of Minecraft, yeah, it's pretty much guaranteed to run well on anything. You're meant to try and code in what you want to build, but my Python skills are so rusty that I haven't even tried to code in. Instead, I just built this lovely brick house. But as you can see, Minecraft Pan Pi, whatever you want to call it, edition worked absolutely okay on the Pan Pi hybrid PC thing. Freeciv, which is essentially Civilization 2 ported to work on pretty much every operating system in existence, ran perfectly fine, and aside from my absolutely tired and probably sleep-deprived state of playing, we can see that the game ran absolutely fine, albeit the text was a little bit hard to read given that I was running the game in windowed mode. But if you do start the game without a GUI, it will start in full screen, and I wasn't too bothered as I could read it and play it perfectly fine. So Civilization is free to eat up your time on the go on a pan. As for Openarena, well, good luck trying to get it to work. I tried everything from installing OpenGL manually to even searching through old custom repositories. I even tried compiling Quake 3 for the Raspberry Pi myself. However, none of these proved to work. So as far as Quake 3 for the Raspberry Pi, well, that was relatively unplayable in the system, mainly due to being unable to find any ways to get it to work. But I've heard if you close your eyes really hard, you might be able to imagine that it works. So if you try that, you can pretend that it's running on your pots and pans. For the next set of tests, I was able to just use RetroPie, which came installed on one of the SD cards I had already prepared earlier, and I copied over a few ROMs. However, for these, I sort of just plugged in my Elgato to capture in the results, so you get to enjoy them with the sort of interesting results, as some of them were so bad that once again they probably would have caused seizures if you were viewing it on the CRT through a viewfinder. So once again, first up with NES emulation, we have Super Mario Bros, which was running at full speed with a solid 60 FPS. So yes, you can play all those 80s Mario games completely fine, as there were no emulation issues present, and it was surprising to see the pan performing so well. By now I'm sort of relatively conflicted whether to just keep calling it the pan or the Pi or mix it together, so whatever you want to call it, the performance is decent if you want to play those 80s Mario games. Now for SNES emulation, which worked a little bit slower but was still playable with Chrono Trigger, one of the more intense RPGs on the system, which worked okay but could experience a bit of slowdown here although when things got more intensive, which is sort of to be expected on a weaker system like this. There wasn't any thermal throttling or anything like that causing any issues, as the tape was seeming to be acting as a conductor, sort of making the pot a giant heatsink of sorts for the Pi, but now I'm just saying pot and Pi so much that I think I'm going insane. But what comes after SNES emulation? Well, Mario 64 on the N64 of course, with the N64 being a pretty complex console. And I've heard people have had much better luck with things like the Raspberry Pi 2 and the later models. But for now, Mario seems to be running in slow motion for us, so yes, it's not exactly ideal to be playing this on the Mario 64 Pi Pot edition that we have in front of us here. And if you thought that was bad, well, you're in for a whole different story with Metal Gear Solid, which ran at around 5 to 10% speed. Of course, I hadn't enabled frame skipping, but for now, this is what you'll have to deal with if you want to try and play Metal Gear Solid on a pan. Truly, weapons surpass Metal Gear. Older games like Doom and stuff will work completely fine, but that's sort of a given at this point. However, what if you want to watch some YouTube videos? Well, in that case you have to start up Kodi, which has been ported to the Raspberry Pi, and in fact they've made their own custom installer for it, which is very nice, and I use my pre-made PAL composite config thing so I could get the PC to actually look somewhat decent on the CRT, and it was actually very crisp when it came to video playback. Using some additional cables we even got sound output, and given that we were using a CRT, it made lower quality YouTube videos that are commonly uploaded in 240p pretty decent quality on the CRT. In fact, even the sound was decent given the fact that the CRT worked. So here's a short example of what you could expect playing a lower quality video on a CRT type thing. So yep, even a pan makes a great little portable media center considering that its native 240p output, even if it is only from composite, works out quite nice on older CRT TVs. But the question on everyone's mind is, how does a pan like this hold up when it comes to something like cooking? Well, using multiple types of pans to cook some dinner, including this pan here, we achieved some pretty decent results as you can agree. So cooking wise, for all types of applications, you can cook absolutely fine on a pan like this. For those of you that like synthetic benchmarks, I auto-tested Firestrike, which worked, which is nice. So in conclusion, this was an April Fool's Day video, but I hope you guys enjoyed it nonetheless, and you found the sort of mini review of the first generation Raspberry Pi incorporated into it somewhat helpful. You can also grab yourself a cheap pan, and I recommend them for cooking, and they work well from my testing. And you've also got that the first gen Pi is also capable of being a decent media center, especially if you're using it with a CRT. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Good night. And if you like this video, don't forget you can always go over to us on Patreon and help support the channel. I'll catch you guys in another video, and you can always like and subscribe for more videos just like this. Except they'll come a year later when it's April Fool's Day again.